Hi, welcome back to the sixth video of the Sublime Spotify series. This video is going to be about OS 2 and it is the second one. There will be 3 videos in total. The previous one, part 5, where we wrote a server. This one where we will write a component that will basically wrap the client and the server. And in the next video, we'll actually write the client, the one that will do the HTTP requests. Okay, so this is where we left off. This was our last commit, where we added the server that would intercept the redirect response from the Spotify API and basically retrieve the token. Okay, and yeah, we removed one line. We wrote tests, and oh yeah, and we also tested the toggle function. And while you were asleep, I cleaned some things up. Let's go back. I did some refactoring, but it's just, I thought I clicked on it. It's just a few things. I just moved this one line from here to here, and I removed the comment. And I also added a redirect port to the settings, because if you remember, the server, it was running on localhost and it was running on a redirect port and that was flexible. In fact, it will be it will be specified by the user. And in fact, we'll talk about it today, why the user has to specify the redirect port. So I did it off the record because the code for it is exactly the same as the code for the refresh interval, right? In fact, let me show you this. Okay, so this is the settings manager, and this is the code for the redirect port. So it has a default of 8080 and it has to be between 1024 and between 65,535, which is a valid range for ports because the ones from 0 to 1023 are already taken. And if we go to file and we open where is it, new view into file, which will open the same file in a different tab, and I do that, and we'll scroll down so that we see the redirect port starting here and the refresh interval starting over here. You see it's exactly the same code. This one has a different default and a different range, and obviously it's named differently. So this one is called int redirect port and this one is called int refresh interval in seconds. All right, so therefore the tests for them for the redirect port also look exactly the same as for the refresh interval in seconds. And also I didn't realize that I didn't have a Sublime settings enabled that would automatically trim the trailing white spaces. So I enabled it, and this is why we see a bunch of changes here. All right, so in this video we're going to talk about OS 2. So we go back to the developerspotify.com, click on the Spotify web API, click on the authorization guide, and we see this, which we briefly mentioned in the previous video. So in the previous video, we talked about 3 ways of getting the token. Remember, in OS 2, it's all about the token, and we've seen that this one authorization code is the only one that is valid for us because the access token can be refreshed, and it's the only option. And this is the entire authorization code flow, which we might go through in the next video. But even in the next video, probably we're not going to discuss it in detail because we will be using a library, a Python library called a SpotiPy with a P that would do like half of that work for us. Okay, so we might not even discuss this thing. This flow in detail in the next video, but we will go through it for sure. In any case, you know the URL, so you can go anytime and see all the details. What we're going to talk about now is basically 2 sentences. Okay, all right, so let me read this. As a first step towards authorization, you will need to register your application. Okay, in fact, let's open this in another tab. That will give you a unique client ID and client secret key to use in the authorization flows. And this is a problem for us because of this. So if we're doing authorization code, and basically authorization code is the only one that we can use because this table basically says, hey, if you mean business, use this one, because it's for long-running applications. And this is what it was written here. The authorization code flow first gets a code, then exchanges it for an access token and the refresh token. since the exchange uses your client secret key, this one, right? You should make that request server side to keep the integrity of the key. So basically, that key is private, and this whole OS2 thing, the way Spotify implemented it, is basically for server-side applications. But in our case, we don't have a server, right? I mean, we wrote a server in the last video, but technically we don't have a server, right? We're writing a plugin for an editor. We're not writing some, I don't know, well, basically server that sits somewhere and acts as a as a broker for us, right? We basically have a thing that sits on the client side, right? And that thing is also written in Python, which is an interpreted language, which means the code is visible. So we can't just generate this client ID and client secret and put it into the code, right? Because it's visible, and also it's open source, right? So what we will do instead is we will basically force our users to register an application, basically to do this. It takes only 10 seconds, and there is no need to create an extra account or anything. This is what we're going to do now. We go there, and we say login, and this is the login of the regular Spotify account, right? So there's no special developer account or anything like that, right? Because remember, our users, they might not even be developers, so they would do that. And let me log in. And what's my password? I think it's that. No, thank you. Don't remember me. All right, so now we're in, and as you can see, I already registered an application for the first time I built it. But let's just create a new one. So we create an app, and we give it a name. It doesn't matter because we're going to delete it now. I'm just going to say name, and I'm going to say description. They both seem to be mandatory. Okay, let's create it. All right, so we got the settings, application's name, description, and there's website, but it's not mandatory anymore. In fact, there's nothing mandatory anymore, right? So this is the client ID, just a sequence of characters, just a string, and this is the client secret, the one that were mentioned here, the client ID and the client secret. And we have to keep them safe. Like, in fact, me showing it to you right now is a security threat, right? So you might go ahead and use it in your application and do some malicious activities, right? But we're going to delete this app right now. So by the time you watch this video, those keys will not be valid. And in fact, they can be regenerated all the time. I never clicked on that. Let's do that. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Let's generate. Boom. And these are the new ones, right? And this is the redirect URL. So that's the thing, right? So once our users log into the Spotify with their Spotify account, they will see this. Maybe you know it from other services like Facebook or Google, where you see this thing. May Spotify do this and this and that, and they will say yes. And then what will happen is the browser will redirect them to this redirect URI, which is why we wrote the server the last time. Watch the previous video if you haven't. So our users, we will have a README file for them. We will tell them that they should put http://localhost : and whatever port they will specify, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and they will click add, and it will be added here, and then they will click save, and it will be registered, right? So if I go to my applications, there is this one now, name, client ID, client secret, redirect URI. So as I said, only in the next video we're actually going to be writing code that actually works with those. As of right now, we're going to delete that. Actually, let's delete it like in a few seconds. What we will do is we will prepare a class that we will do in the next video, and it's going to be a client, because usually when you're talking about some service, you usually have like a server and a client, and we already wrote a server. Actually forget what I just said, because we wrote a server for something completely different, so I don't want to get you confused. So the server is the Spotify endpoint, right? The Spotify API, and the client is basically going to be an abstraction over the client ID, client secret, and technically redirect URI, but because it's always localhost, it's just going to be a port, right? So let's just go ahead to Sublime, and in our Spotify folder, we're just going to create the file called client.py, and rendering issues. Okay, it's client.py, and it is going to be a simple Python class, class client, okay, and it's just going to have a constructor, and it will just get self and the client ID and the client secret and the redirect port. Okay, and I'm not even sure yet if that's necessary, but as of right now, all that it will do is it will just store them in variables. Client ID equals client ID, and the same thing for the secret, and the same thing for the redirect port. Okay, and it will have a few methods that we will add actually in this video, but not right now. Those are going to be, you know, get the OS2 URL, or, you know, get the cache token, or get the fresh token. Basically things that will abstract over, you know, HTTP requests for us. Okay, so what we will do today is we will actually create a new file called we're going to call it just Spotify, because this will be the main file that sort of puts everything together. If you remember, hold up, open recent, that thing, that the picture from the previous video. Today we're going to write the code that will say, okay, do we already have a token? And if we do, then, you know, display the current track title. And if we don't, then start a server, you know, open the default browser and all of that stuff. So yeah, this is like this is going to be the component that will put the client and the server and the settings manager that we already wrote together. Okay, and we're going to have two tests. Let me create a file over here called test spotify.py. Okay, so it will have just a class test Spotify, as always. Remember, I told you that I'm not going to torture you with tests. Well, some tests are really important, and they will actually help me to explain to you what the Spotify component will do, and also what the client component will do. Okay, there will only be two tests. Okay, so before we write it, we will have to bring in unit test, and also the same as we did was settings manager. We need to bring in the entire folder like that, and for that we need the OS and sys. We don't need random, but let's just copy that. We don't need random, and let's move unit test down there. Okay, so we basically have that in every test file, because we need to bring in the source Spotify folder, because, you know, over here we're gonna obviously test the Spotify component that we haven't even written yet. Okay, so let's save it, and yeah, so the first test, and again there will be only two. It's going to say if token is cached. So basically, if you already have it, side effect current track name. Okay, and remember, our plugin, you know, the goal of our plugin is to display the current track in the title bar, but in our test we're not going to do that. We're just gonna insert the side effect. So in production, we will the side effect that we will insert will be, you know, displayed in the title bar, but in our test it's going to be something else. It's going to be probably some assert statement. Okay, so I said there will be only two tests because there are two cases, right? In fact, let me open the picture again. Maybe I should leave it open somewhere. Let's put it down over here. There will be two tests. One basically that will test this branch, and the other one that will test this branch. So in this case, you know, we already have a token, right? Do we already have a token? Yes, we do. So this is the one that will test that. Okay. So at some point we're going to create the Spotify object, right? And we're just going to call it Spotify, and we will give it the side effect. And the side effect is just going to be a function that, you know, takes the message, and in fact it's not a message, it's actually, you know, the track title, but let's just call it a message. And it will do actual equals message, but it will not declare the variable because its variable is already going to be here. And remember the trick that I showed you in the last video where we have to tell Python that we're not declaring a new variable, we're actually just storing it, right? So this is what the side effect will do. So we're going to call a method on Spotify that will basically, retrieve the current track. I mean, everything is faked, right? It's going to retrieve the current track, and in production it will display it in the title bar. But in our case, all it's going to do is just going to capture the result in the variable. Okay, so in the end of our test, we're just going to say assert equal actual sum track name. Okay, so this is basically our test. We'll create this Spotify thing that we don't even have yet. We give it a side effect, which in production will be different, but in our case, it's just going to capture whatever this component is given it into the variable. And in the end, we're going to assert that the actual value is some track name. So let's actually call that function, the one that we don't even have yet. Spotify dot, we're going to call it run once, because remember our plugin is going to be a loop that will constantly display the current track name, but the loop will basically call this run once function. Okay, so there will be run once, and the other one will be called run main loop or something. I don't really remember. So it will get an instance of a client, remember the one that we will write in the next video, but in this one we're going to fake it, and it will get a function send OS2 request, and in production the implementation of that function is going to be open the browser and point it to a page. So as of right now we're going to say none, because we don't need to do that, because in our case the token is already cached, so we already have the token, so we don't need to do all of that stuff, so we don't need to pass in that, so it's going to be null. And also the get redirect response thing, which is the one that we will inject into the server, is also none because we don't need it right here. Okay, so that's like almost it. Okay, and the client is going to be an inner class called here a client. Okay, and it will have a function get cached token. Whoops, token self. And it will just say return some fake token, okay? Which already means, by the way, that in our client later, let me put the client down there, we will need to have that function. So maybe let's put it in. Let's put it in. It should be this function, and as of right now, it should just return them. Okay. Right. And another thing that we will do, we will need to have is currently playing track name, and it's just gonna get a token. Okay, and it will return some track name, because this is what we're asserting in the end, right? So this might not make a lot of sense yet, right? But this is basically the whole turnaround. I mean, we have to create the actual client somewhere. Let's create it here. Client equals fake client. Okay, so an instance of that, so that we can pass it in over here. Okay, let me show you the whole thing. So this is the whole test. Okay, so we create a Spotify object. We give it a side effect, which will just capture whatever is passed into a variable, and we call the function called run once, and we give it the client, which is a fake client, but we already know that the client will need two of the two functions, this one and this one. Let's add it to the client before we forget. Again, the implementation of this client is going to be done in the next video. Okay. But yeah, so this test works with cache tokens. So there will be a function, get cache token, and then obviously there's a function, give me the currently playing track with this token. And in another test that we will write in a few minutes, we will have a function called, I believe it's called get fresh token. Yeah, get fresh token, and it will still have the currently playing track name, and it will just give it another token. Okay, and we don't need these because we will need them though in another test, I believe. I just decided to write this one because it's simpler. We will not need these because we already have a token. Okay, so they shouldn't even be called. They shouldn't throw any exceptions. Okay, so let's restart Sublime and try to run it. And obviously it's going to fail because we don't even have that component, okay? So let's see, test current project. It took a while because remember the test for the server, they have timers that would sleep. Ran 20 tests. And okay, global name Spotify is not defined. Well, obviously, okay. So let's actually go and define it. So it's going to be class Spotify. And as we know from our test, let's close the console. As we know from our test, which is here, let's move it down. Or actually, I don't remember. Do we usually keep tests up? Doesn't matter. Okay, so the test is down here. So remember, it needs to have a side effect as a parameter. So let's implement that. So this is going to be a constructor self side effect, and we're just going to capture it in a private variable like that, and it's all good. Okay, so that part should already work. And now we need a function run once, and again, because it's Python, we can just copy paste the whole thing because we don't need the types. So we do that. Def run once, and I don't want to have default parameters like that. Okay, cool. So remember that trick that I showed you that you can read everything top to bottom. So we're just going to apply the same trick. Okay, so we're going to have run once here, and in the end we're just going to call it. Okay, so now everything that we write in between, we will be able to read top to bottom. So the first thing that we have is we want to side effect the current track name using cached token. Okay, and because we're basically going to side effect current track name using cache token, and we will have another function that will do the same thing with a fresh token, we will implement it in such a way that they will both call basically the same function. It's the one that we will write in a few seconds, and it will be called just side effect current track name. Okay, and it will have two parameters. The first one is going to be the actual token, and in this case it is going to be the cache token. Right, so it comes from the client, and remember we passed in a fake client, and in the fake client the get cache token will just return some fake token. Okay, and the second parameter is going to be a fallback. Once we're done implementing the code, we will call authenticate to get fresh token that that will use this and this, and we'll start a server and open the browser and do all of that cool stuff. Okay, but as of right now, our fallback is just going to be self side effect sorry, doesn't work yet. But again, nothing calls that code yet, and nothing will get into that branch yet. Okay, so when we're going to run the test, we're not going to see that. Okay, we're going to only see that. But when we're going to implement the second test, once we're going to run it, we should actually be able to see that. Okay. Right. So let's implement that function. Side effect current track name. It's going to be right here, and this time I'm being really careful with the indentation. Okay. All right. So side effect current track name, and it gets the token, and it gets the fallback, and all it's doing is, if token, which in Python just checks for none. So if it's all good, then self side effect client dot this currently playing track name, and we'll give it a token. And you know, our fake client just ignores the token, right? So it just says it's just going to return some track name. Okay, so and if there is no token, just call the fallback function. And in our case, it's you know, just side effect. Sorry, it doesn't work yet. Okay, and I believe if I did everything right, that should be enough. Okay. So as you can see, there's no sort of like actual logic in there. It's just a thing that puts everything together and runs through that workflow. So if I did everything right, it should already pass. Let's see. I probably did some mistakes somewhere. I always do. All right. See. What happened? Global name Spotify is not what? Oh, right. Well, that's obviously not enough. We still need to import it. Import it over here. Import Spotify from Spotify. All right. By the way, this kind of message is something that if you have like, I don't know, let's say a few months, or not actually a few months, like probably like more like a year, this is like a very common mistake in Python, I presume. And you basically, obviously, you already know, okay, so there's something I was import, or, you know, so I was looking here, but I obviously still need to import it. In case you didn't realize yet, I'm not an expert in Python. In fact, I've been doing it only for like 4 months now. That's actually my first project in Python. So, so there we go. And now it says, run once, got another 4 arguments, send OS2 request. Did I forget the self thing? Yeah, I forgot the self thing. That's also a very common Python thing. All right. Test. Fail. Okay. Oh, all right. Here's the problem. We're calling run once, and run once defines 2 defs, right? That we can read, you know, top to bottom, but nothing is actually calling that. So all we need to do is to actually call that. There we go. And it should be over here, right? So on this level, okay. Right, so let's test that. Yes, and now it's finally okay. And I believe that if we return that thing, that it should still be fine. Okay, loading the console, test current track name. All right. And yes, it's still fine. Okay, so we're done with this test. But actually, I'm not gonna write the test for this for the next thing on camera. But basically, every time we're going to say, you know, client do something, we want just to be sure that that it's safe. So we're just gonna wrap it in a try. Okay, just wrap it in a try. And if anything happens, we're just going to side effect that. So basically, even if there's an exception, maybe the REST API is down, or maybe there's a bug, or whatever, we want to see the exception message in the title bar as well. Okay, so let's just, you know, it shouldn't break anything, but just in case, let's start it. All right. A few seconds, and there we go. Everything is still fine. Okay. by the way, when I'm recording these videos, I try to commit only once in the end. If this was an actual project, this would be a good place for me to commit that. I would say, hey, you know, I did the left side of the branch, right? So if you already have the token cached, then we can display the current track name. Everything is fake. We're not actually talking to the Spotify API, but we already have a test that tests sort of all the wiring, you know, the actual workflow. Okay, so what we do now is we're at the second test, and that will be sort of similar, but it will test the other part, right? It's going to be called, actually let's close that one for now. It's going to be called test if token is not cached, then call the get redirect response function, right? Because remember, if we don't have a token, then we do, you know, this whole complicated thing, right? We're not going to test that. All we need to test is that we're going to call a function that will do that thing for us, right? So we're going to assume that it's just, you know, doing everything. Okay. So our test is going to look like this. You know, at some point, again, as in the previous one, we're going to have Spotify, which is, you know, Spotify, and it will have a side effect. And the side effect is going to be the same, right? Because all we need to do is to verify that something usually comes in. Okay. Okay. So the side effect is the same as before. Okay, and the end of the test is going to be very similar. In fact, we can copy paste that from here. So this is the end of the test, but in our case, this is actually not going to be none, and this also is not going to be none. Okay, so in our case, this, which we will put over here, which is a def. We got the OS2 URL. And we did a similar thing in the previous video where we wrote the server. We're gonna say self assert equal, and that the OS2 URL is the same as it would come from the client. Get OS2 URL. And we won't even have to look it up because the library, the Spotify library, is going to do it for us. But basically, as of right now, we already know that there will be a function get OS2 URL on the client. Let's put it over here. Just kind of return none, and it needs a self, which I usually forget. Okay, so this is this one. Okay. And there will be get redirect response. And the get redirect response is going to be the one from the server. Remember, we already have the server that does that for us. It has the get redirect response, and it has this signature. It has the send those to request, the URL, and everything. So we're just going to copy paste that. We're going to copy paste that, and since, you know, everything in here is fake, all we're doing is a bunch of assertions, right? So let's actually copy that one, and we're going to assert the same thing actually again. We don't really need to do that again, but why not? You know, we're going to assume that the redirect port is going to come from the client again. Redirect port, and it's not a method. It's just a value. And funny enough, we already have that actually. So this one will already work even in production. Okay. And the last one is going to be the available duration in seconds is going to be 60. So we're doing that because because we're testing, so we're faking the client, we're faking the server, we're faking the web browser, right? There is no web browser here, but we're not faking the Spotify component. The Spotify component is actually the one that's doing the real thing, and it will need the real value for this duration for login in seconds. Because remember, if the users take longer than 60 seconds, and we specify 60 seconds, it's a hard-coded value, then basically the server will hang there and block the current thread. I'm not sure if you remember this from the previous video. Maybe watch it again. At some point it will say block thread until Spotify responds, and it will have a circuit breaker that will operate with that value, which is going to be 60 seconds. And if nothing is coming, it will do this. It will send the HTTP request to itself, just so that the server is not waiting there forever. And then because everything runs in a loop, we will set a new tab will open, right? And the user will be able to log in again, because you never know, right? Maybe the browser opens and then the phone rings, and then our user, sitting there talking on the phone with somebody, right? We don't want the server to just hang there. Anyway, let's get back. So that's it. So basically, this one fakes the server, this one fakes the browser, and all that is left is to fake the client. Okay. So this is a client, fake client, and in this case we will actually extend the actual client, the one that we wrote here. Okay, and this time I'm not going to make the same mistake over here. I'm going to import both import client and Spotify. Okay, so let's get back. So we extend it just so that we don't have to implement like every method. Okay, so again, it will have get OS2 URL. It's just going to return some URL, and this is going to be the function that the client will call here, right? Client get OS2 URL, which will happen somewhere here in the fallback. Okay. It's I know it might be a bit complicated right now. It's all just gonna make sense once we're gonna start implementing the code, the production code, not the test code. Okay, so we have the get cached token, and remember this is not the test for the cache token, so it has to return none, because this is what our test will do over here. It will say, if token is null, basically do the fallback. So we have to make sure that it's null. And I'm saying null, but it's called null in Python. I'm sorry. All right. So now the actual thing that is important, get the fresh token, right? Based on the Spotify response code. And this is what, if you remember from the previous video, this is what our server will do, right? So the Spotify will respond, and the token will be somewhere here in the path. Okay, so this is going to be the code, the response code, and then we will need to extract it and so on. Okay, but we're in a test, so all we need to do is to say return some fake token. And I'm sorry if all this testing is confusing you, but if you take some time and actually look at the code, not right now, but like on GitHub, it will all make sense, I promise you. All right, so it's just some fake token, and also the currently playing track name, the same as in previous name. In the previous one, it's just going to return some track name, which is this thing that we're testing over here, some track name. Notice that this one is exactly the same as in the other test. Right, currently playing track name, same thing. But in this case, our code is going to go into the branch where it will get the cache token and pass it in, whereas in our case, it will get the fresh token and pass it in. Right, and I believe that's it. So we have the fake client. We just need to create an instance of it. So let's do that over here. Client equals fake client, and oh yeah, and because it already has a constructor, it needs some ID. It needs some secret. and it needs some redirect port, and it doesn't really matter which one it's going to be, it just needs to be an integer. Okay, let's restart Sublime and run it once. Okay, errors 1. It says non-type object is not callable. Actually, I want to know exactly why. So it was a line 10, which is here, but then it says line 20, fallback. Why is it not called? It should be called. Maybe because it's not a valid lambda, not a valid. Oh yeah, maybe Python doesn't have ETA expansion. Okay, so hold on, lambda, and it will get something in, and it will do that. Maybe this should fix it. Because what I want to see is that the assertion will fail, and then it will say that it's not some track name, but it's in fact that. This is what I want to see, and I hope that I can see it now. Missing one required positional argument. Really? Oh, it doesn't have anything. All right, so it's just like that. All right. Come on. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. So some track name is not the same as sorry doesn't work yet. Okay, so this is exactly what I wanted to see. This is the exact way of how the test should fail the first time you write it. Because remember, we're doing some sort of test-driven development where we write the test first, and we want to see it fail, and I want to see it fail for the right reason. Okay, so the implementation is going to look like that. So instead of doing that, we will actually call a function called authenticate to get first token, and it will be implemented right here. Just really need to make sure that I got the indentation right. Okay, so it's going to be here, and all that it will do is it will call get redirect response. All right, remember, get redirect response is the one that we passed in here, and in our test get redirect response, it's just doing a bunch of assertions. It basically makes sure that we pass in the correct arguments. That's all that it's doing. So we pass in the send us to request function, which is passed in here. I'm sorry if I'm scrolling too fast. Okay, so it's here, and it passed in over here, and this is our test. It's luckily it's open at the exact spot. All it's doing is an assert, but the actual implementation, remember, the actual implementation will actually open the browser. Okay, so we do that, and then basically then we just follow that. Okay, so os2 URL is going to be client.get. In fact, you know what? I'm afraid to make typos, so I'm just going to do that. Get os2 URL, and in our test, it is doing that some URL. In fact, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do that instead. So let's do some URL over here. And what else? Fresh token. We got a redirect port and something else. Did we specify the redirect port somewhere? Hold up. Yeah, over here. So it's 1337. So let's put the 1337 over here. All right, that actually makes more sense. Now we're actually testing something. All right, so so now because I've seen like this smell. It's called a code smell. Like I'm looking at it, and I'm like, hey, I'm basically copy pasting the production code and the test code, and usually it's a code smell. This is not not what you want to have. Okay, so the redirect port is going to be client dot redirect port, and hold up, forgot a comma. And there's going to be a handle function. Remember the one that the server expects? This is the server. Remember, it gets this handle thing, and this is what will handle the path in the browser, the one that contains a token. Okay, yeah, and this is actually the core of the fallback, right? So the handle is actually the fallback. We'll just copy paste that, and it will be called using fresh token, right? So this is the core of the fallback. It will actually get the fresh token. Okay, and the last one, let's look at our test. The last one is doing that. So let's copy paste the name, just the variable name. It should be 60. Let's see. All right, test current project. And what did I do wrong this time? Come on, come on, come on. All right. A fake client has no attribute redirect port. All right, why did I assume that the constructor would be propagated? It's actually not going to be propagated. Let's copy paste it from here. In fact, I wonder if we even need to extend that. Let's try that later. Because as of right now, I don't really feel like we're getting anything from it. But maybe I'm forgetting something. So all right, it still says the same thing. There's no attribute redirect port. All right, because it's a public property that we're testing it, we should also make it public, right? So let's have it like that, and maybe even like that, and also do that. Okay, it's really warm in here. We had like 30 degrees Celsius today. Whoops, I typed something wrong. Oh no. Let's get rid of that. Save. Okay. Side effect current track name using fresh token is not defined. Oh really? Did I forget to do that? Oh my god. Of course. Oh my god. All right. So how silly of me. All right. So side effect current track name using not cached fresh token. It's going to get the Spotify redirect response, and it will do basically the same as this guy, right? In fact, let's just copy paste that. Let's copy paste that so that we see the difference. So there's obviously no token, so there's no need to and there's no fallback, right? So let's remove the if else part. And a try catch block never hurt anyone. But in case it's going to fail, we're just going to provide a better message, and we're just going to call it. We don't even need that. You know, so if everything goes wrong, so if we don't have a cache token and we can't retrieve a new token, then something obviously went wrong. So we're just gonna say, you know, maybe we shouldn't do it now, but it's just a string basically. We're gonna say side effect error, and side effect error is just going to be a def. Side effect error, which is just going to call self side effect, and it will give it like this super long string. And in Python, it's got to call, you can just do some string here, and then some string here, and then some type the same thing. and it will concatenate all of them automatically. So you don't need to do like plus like you would do like in Java or C# or other languages, right? So we're just gonna say I couldn't get authorization, and I'm using the American pronunciation spelling authorization token from Spotify, okay, and the space, and another tab should have opened in your browser for you to try to log in again, space. Please restart Sublime, because that hasn't killed anyone yet, if the tab did not open. Okay, let's check the spelling. In fact, maybe Sublime can do this for me. Okay, it just doesn't know Spotify. All right. By the way, if you're using Sublime F6, check the spelling. See, it says one misspelled word, and it only checks the strings, so it doesn't check that, for example. Okay, right. I just realized that I copy pasted the wrong one. I copy pasted that one, but that one is going to stay. It just gets a token and there's fallback. This is the one that is called from both places. What I wanted to copy paste was that one, right? And we're still going to have a try except block, so we're just going to put this one over here, right? Okay, so let me make some space. So there was this function side effect contract name using cache token, and it would call this helper function was a cache token, and in case of fallback it will say authenticate to get first token. And now we wrote the same one with a fresh token, this one fresh token, and it's doing a similar thing. It's calling the same method, but this time with client get cache token. And as a fallback, it's not going to do that. As a callback, it's just going to say side effect error. And this is just a fail-safe that in case this goes wrong, we're just still gonna side effect error, okay? Because something went wrong, and even if you would catch an actual exception here, there's no need to display the actual exception, because this is something that our users can't actually fix, right? So they might just retry. That's all they can do. So let's just tell them to retry, and if that doesn't help, then they should file a bug or something. Okay, so now we've implemented that one, and if I didn't do anything super stupid today, I'm not sure why I'm doing so many stupid things today. I'm sorry. Yeah, so it should be. By the way, imagine if we were doing this without tests. Python is a dynamic interpreted language. Doing that without tests is crazy. And remember that this is a YouTube tutorial. So basically, I have that code written on another monitor, and I'm basically copy pasting it, and I'm still making mistakes. So that either means that I'm completely retarded, or that programming is actually really, really hard. And if you're doing it in a dynamic interpreted language and you don't have tests, then may God help you. All right, so something is still not good. Something is still not good. We shouldn't. Oh, and also, yeah, this is a typical copy paste error. We're actually calling get cache token here, but we're in a fresh token function. We actually should be calling get fresh token. And in fact, I don't even remember if we have it on the client. Yeah, we don't even have it yet. So it's gonna be that self, and this will get a Spotify redirect response. So basically, in both cases, we're calling the cache token thing, and in our case, it's null, so nothing happened. Okay. Yeah. So in this case, it's just gonna return none, because we're going to implement this client in the next video. Okay. And we need to give it. And I believe that was the issue. All right, console loaded. Oh my God, still the same. Are you serious? Oh, the get redirect response should call at some point the handle function, and we're not doing that. I totally forgot that. I forgot to do that, of course. what do we have? Test Spotify. Over here, of course, it's not enough to just assert a few things and be done with it. We just need to send some response. Technically, we could also test if this function is called in here, this one, but it's already tested in the server, so we don't need to do that. Oh man, one line to rule them all. All right, so 24th time. Yes, so it worked. So we have two tests again. One test if we already have a token, and the other one test if we don't have a token, which basically completes this picture, this way and this way, and we already have a server. So let me see if there's something to clean up over here. Nope. And if there's something to clean up over here, actually, let me test if we need that client. I don't remember why I did that. Let's remove it, and also, let's test it first. Remember, that's one of the cool things about tests. Like if you have tests, you can just play around with your code, and it's gonna get better. Let's see if it's fine like this. Yeah, it's fine like this. And also nobody's calling that. So let's comment it out. But basically, it should still be fine. Yeah, it's still fine. Okay. And that's an interesting thing. Because we know that this one is being called from our tests over here. Sorry, not over here. Over here from our production code. The other ones are not, and I believe it's going to stay like this. Then the actual implementation of the client, the production one, it will also not need to do that. It will do something else. In fact, it will pass it over to the Spotify API. To instantiate, the Spotify client. So our client is just going to be a wrapper around it, but that's going to be discussed in another video. So that's basically it, like 50 lines of code. And so in the next video, we're going to do the client that will use the Spotify library. I'm going to show you guys how to put it in as a dependency into Sublime, because it's not as simple as using the Python package manager, which is called PEEP. Or pipe, probably PEEP, PIP. Even though the Spotify is published to the PEEP repository, Sublime runs sort of outside of that thing, because it has its own interpreter, it has its own scope and everything. But yeah, that's for another video. I hope you like this one. Sorry that I did so many mistakes. I'm trying to get better. Leave me some comments, and let's commit that. Let's see, cd config sublime-text 3 packages sublime Spotify rest. Let's see. Okay. Test Spotify client. Yeah, basically we added a bunch of stuff. They're all green now. Okay, so that's video 6. Added Spotify edit the main wiring file component and outlined the HTTP client. All right, and let's push it. And let's see in our browser. There we go, 11 commits, video 6. And let's see what we did. So we outlined this client. We created this Spotify component, which has one function called run once, or one method, and it tries to get the current track by using the cache token. And if it doesn't if it doesn't work, then it tries to kick off this whole server authentication flow where the browser will open and they will wait for the redirect response and the user will log in and everything. And then once the token is there, it will try to show the current check name using the fresh token. Okay, and if that doesn't work, it will just say, okay, sorry, try again. Okay, and we had some tests. We had 2 tests, the one for the cached case and the one for the not cached case, and that's it. It looks like a very clean commit because I already refactored stuff before that, so there are no surprise changes. All right, so let me know what I can do better the next time. Like this video if you did, dislike it if you didn't. I don't mind. Yeah, and I see you next time.